Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. I'm Muhammad Adam Dharma bin Pakistilan. I'm an ESL teacher in National Secondary Public School and also a final year student of MED TESL School Holiday Program of International Islamic University Malaysia. Welcome to today's webinar on teaching literature in CFR-Aligned English Language Curriculum. This webinar is organized by the accredited co-curricular Student Development Division of International Islamic University Malaysia in collaboration with the postgraduate student of Masters of Education TESL School Holiday Program of International Islamic University Malaysia. For your information, the webinar is conducted in 3 sessions. This is session 1 on teaching literature in CFR-Aligned English Language Curriculum, Theory and Practices. Session 2 will be held tonight at 8:30 to 10 p.m. on teaching literature in CFR-Aligned English Language Curriculum, the challenges and solutions. And session 3 will be held next Saturday, 14 January at 10 to 11:30 a.m. on teaching literature in CFR-Aligned English Language Curriculum, practices in ESL classroom. On behalf of the organizing secretariat, we hope that all of you could attend all the 3 sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, to kickstart our session today, with great honor, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Faiza Idrus, Head of Department, Accredited Co-Curricular Student Development Division, International Islamic University Malaysia, who is also the advisor for this project, to deliver her opening speech.
Thank you, Adam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good morning to everyone. First of all, I thank Allah for the chance and the opportunity that we have to have this series of seminar organized by students of Masters of Holiday Program, TESL program, and they are all taking these subject on seminar in the practices of teaching literature in the ESL context. So this is actually one of the requirement of the subject, and Alhamdulillah, I'm glad to say that I have a very hardworking bunch of students and teachers, and I hope everyone will be able to get something out of the 3 series of this seminar. And I would like to thank the speakers who have been invited to share their experiences and to also to give us some guidance on the new things that is happening in schools. And of course, some of us at the university are quite unaware of the development of CFR in the classroom. And of course, I would like to thank the hardworking committee who has been working very hard to ensure that everything is in order. And also, of course, I would like to extend these thanks to all the Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri who are involved and their support to us to organize this seminar, right? And of course, I think this is being recorded, and we are going to go through the recording again, and of course, we are going to have some takeaways from the series of seminar. So with that, I thank all of you. I thank the audience for being here today, and have an enjoyable seminar. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Doctor, for the short and yet very sweet speech. On behalf of the organizing secretariat, we would like to thank you for all the guidance and support for making this webinar a reality despite of all the challenges we've been through. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. As you are aware, this webinar is broadcasted live via YouTube. You will have the opportunity to submit text question to today's presenters by typing your questions into the comment pane of the control panel. You may send your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during or at the end of the presentation. The webinar feedback link will be provided at the end of the session. Participants will only get their certificate of attendance after they have responded to the feedback form. Link for SPL KPM will also be given at the end of the session. Ladies and gentlemen, a bit on the status quo on the teaching of literature in our English language curriculum. Prior to the implementation of CFR-aligned English language curriculum, literature is taught as a component as part of the KBSM curriculum or KSSM per se. People learn local and Western literature such as poetries, short stories, and novels. This literature component are tested in the school examination and also public examination such as PT3 and SPM. Currently, with the implementation of CFR-aligned English language curriculum, literature is taught merely as reading for pleasure. In primary schools, the literature component is taught via language arts section of the lesson. On the other hand, in secondary school, it is taught via the literature in action section of the lesson. CFR-aligned English language curriculum also brought about the introduction of the Big L, English literature, offered to only Form 4 and Form 5 pupils who are interested in taking the subject at SPM level. Ladies and gentlemen, for the purpose of the discussion today, this session will focus around teaching literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum in ESL classroom in primary and secondary level, mostly at rural school, and not on the literature subject offered at SPM level. For that matter, we are honored to have with us today our three distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Dr. Azlin binti Muhammad, Head of English Language Teaching Management Department, English Language Teaching Center, Ministry of Education, Malaysia. Next, we have Madam Kusuriati binti Ko Isha, English Language Teacher and District Master Trainer at SMK Batu 17, Padang Lumot, Gua Cempedak, Kedah. And our third speaker, Mr. Praveen Balakrishnan, English Language Teacher at SMK Padang Midin, Jalan Kuala Berang, Kuala Terengganu. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to engage ourselves in a critical discussion on teaching literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum, theory and practices. Before I pass the session to our first speaker, it's only fair for us to know a bit about Dr. Azlin binti Muhammad. Currently, Dr. Azlin binti Muhammad is the Head of English Language Teaching Management Department at English Language Teaching Center, ELTC, Ministry of Education. She has more than 20 years of teaching experience in secondary, post-secondary, and teacher education. Her professional and active involvement in the education field includes curriculum development and revision, material selection and adaptation, module building, teacher training, pre-service and in-service assessment and research. She believes that every child deserves the best education a nation can provide, and to do so, teachers need to be well trained and equipped with the skills to perform their best. Dr. Azlin will share her knowledge and experiences with regards to theoretical concept of CFR and why we align it with our English language curriculum, the status of literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum, and finally her opinion on the integration of literature component in CFR-aligned English language curriculum. Without further ado, I pass the session to Dr. Azlin. Over to you, Doctor.
All right. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Brother Adam, for the introduction, and to also the organizing committee for inviting me to be part of this. I believe is a very good effort in highlighting issues, matters pertaining to the teaching of literature in the current curriculum. All right, I've been tasked with the three parts of what has been highlighted by Brother Adam just now, Mr. Moderator. So to start off, I would say more like a discussion, but before we go into the discussion itself, it would be best to look at certain aspects of the topic for today. So I will be speaking on the following areas, which is the context, the framework itself, which everybody calls as we have CFR, we have Cefr, we have quite a lot of names that goes with the acronym. It is the Common European Framework of References for Languages, or better known as CFR. And I'll also be looking at the status of literature in the current English language curriculum. And I've been asked to give my views and opinion in how we can actually integrate literature or how it is actually done in practice. Okay, so moving on to the context. Okay, if you look at the timeline that's featured on my slide, we need to realize that the context of the reform English language education system started with the MBI and MBI policy, or better known as, also known as the, in Malay it's called the Memartabat Bahasa Malaysia, Memperkukuh Bahasa Inggeris, which is to uphold Bahasa Malaysia, but at the same time to strengthen the English language. And this policy was actually introduced in 2010, which defines the respective roles of English in the education system. Now, the policy strives to strengthen the proficiency in English as the international language of communication and knowledge, thus enabling the exploration of knowledge, which is so vital in competing at national and global levels. Now, here, English is viewed as a means to empower the nation's citizens to compete in today's era of globalization. All right, we cannot deny that. And the next important landmark was in which we are currently going through is the Malaysia Education Blueprint 2013-2025, MEB. Okay, and this document or this blueprint actually sets out a general plan for the reform and development of the education system from 2013 to 2025. Okay, so this blueprint actually charts the education policies in Malaysia for the next 17 years. We are now in 2023. We have 2 years left to the end of this blueprint or the plan. Okay, and to ensure this is to ensure that Malaysia's ability to compete globally with other developed nations. Now, in the blueprint, they have actually outlined 11 fundamental shifts to transform the education system to ensure that we are able to achieve what we have aimed for. And among these shifts, I would like to highlight shift 2, which is concerned with the ensuring that every child is proficient in Bahasa Malaysia and the English language. All right. And among the strategies outlined in shift 2 is to upskill the English language teachers, and also relating to our topic today, expanding the opportunities for more exposure to English via an expanded compulsory literature in English module at both primary and secondary level. So one of the major decisions made in the MEB in relation to English is to actually align the curriculum and assessment to the CFR. All right. And in order to address this reform highlighted in MEB, the English language education reform in Malaysia, the Roadmap 2015 and 2025, was produced to provide a detailed plan for the nation to embark on the reform of the English language education system aligned to international standards. So the adoption of the CFR actually has added international relevance to the roadmap and provides a common reference for aligning English language curricula and pedagogy, including teaching and learning materials and assessment. And I believe teachers around the nation, I mean, teachers in the nation have been trained or have been exposed at least to what CFR is all about. Now, often, I've often heard teachers say, "I'm teaching CFR. I'm teaching CFR." You're not teaching CFR. You're teaching English, but you're using CFR as a framework. Okay, always have that in mind, that you are not actually teaching the framework. You're teaching the language, but you're using the framework as a guideline for you to know where your students are at currently at their academic level or at their proficiency level itself. All right. So coming back to the blueprint, the aim for this, not the blueprint, the roadmap. The aim of this roadmap is actually to produce English language programs from way down the preschool up to university and also teacher education, for us to be able to prepare our young Malaysians to meet the challenges of the 21st century with respect to the use of English as a means of communication in different contexts of use. Okay. Now, one of the questions raised just now by our moderator is, we need to know why CFR, right? Now, we aspire for our pupils to have that international mobility. Therefore, in order for us to have our students to be internationally recognized, we need to also align to an international standard. All right. So previously, our curriculum, if you are still very much aware, we had our KSSR, KSSM, Semakan 2017, in which they were not aligned to the CFR framework, okay, the CFR. But now we have completed the cycle, and we have now come to a complete set of primary and secondary curriculum, which is fully aligned to CFR. For your information also, we also have the post-secondary now, known as PSELF, Post-Secondary English Language Curriculum Framework, in which this is also aligned to the CFR. Now that is actually based on what the roadmap has actually outlined in our detailed plan. Okay, so now CFR is actually a framework. Coming back to CFR, you have to understand that CFR is not something that we teach, but CFR is actually a framework that describes language ability of learners around the world. And it acts as a standard to rank English language ability based on the different skills for learners internationally. If you are very much well-versed, or you're well-versed with the compendium, all right, the CFR compendium, it actually lists a lot of can-do statements that defines a language ability. But again, we don't use everything that's in the compendium. We select, and that is exactly what we do at the curriculum development or the curriculum revision of the documents we use currently in our system. Okay. Yes, CFR was initially designed for speakers of other languages across Europe to organize language proficiency in Europe. But then now it has spread. Okay, its use has spread to more than 45 nations around the world, and it has now become a fundamental reference point of English across the world for governmental policies that determine either immigrant for entry, citizenship, or even national curriculum targets. Now, what is in the framework are descriptors that focus on the learners, the users of the language, and it provides the learners with a tool for reflecting on what is involved in a language and the language learning itself, teaching and also assessment. Okay, so the CFR describes 6 levels of proficiency for language learning. Okay, in every level, a list of the expected competence and skills that language learners should have and be able to perform is outlined. Okay, we have the global standard, But for the purpose of our curriculum, we have also defined it in the respective DSKP or the document standards. Okay, it provides you the descriptive scheme to analyze what is needed in language learning. And for teachers, I believe it is easier for you then to identify what your students or your pupils are able or not able to do when you're carrying out or you're teaching in the classroom. Okay, now in the scale, as you can see on the slide, what I have actually presented here is based on a baseline study and all that. Never mind, we focus on the aspired targets. Okay, focus on the aspired targets. You can see that. Just hold on. Okay, if you look at the aspired target at primary school, students at year six are supposed to exit at A2 mid. Okay, and students at Form 5 are expected to exit the education system with a B1 high. So these are the aspired targets that we hope our students are able to achieve by the end of each academic year. Okay, and it is spelled out clearly in the curriculum, in the documents themselves. So CFR framework is able to help us do that by identifying the can-do statements that they need to achieve for that level. Okay, and if you look back into the curriculum standards or the document itself, all right, the standards-based language curriculum document, you will find that you are provided with a content standard, a learning standard, and a performance standard. So the content standard is an overarching standard that these students are supposed to achieve or by the end of that primary school education or even secondary school education, okay, depending on the levels. And the learning standards are the ones that you need to achieve at each academic year. And the performance standard is to align with the type of assessment, okay, that these students are supposed to achieve in relation to the learning standards that has been outlined. Okay. All right. So we know that CFR, they have 6 levels. We start with A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2. So for A1 and A2, we are actually targeting for the primary level. B1, A2 to B1 will be the secondary. Post-secondary will be at B2. All right, for your information, with the current post-secondary English language curriculum, we have the post-secondary students. They are those who are in the matriculation centers, secondary school, matriculation centers, Form 6. And also those who are in the preparation program in IPG. So they are supposed to be they're supposed to exit at B2 level. And teachers are supposed to be at C1, or even sometimes they are able to get to C2, but lecturers are to be at C2 level. Okay. So again, what I would like to highlight here is CFR is enabling us to be more clearer in identifying a student's ability and how they progress from one level to the other. So the moment they are able to achieve the set of descriptors, the set of can-do statements for the year, they then move on to the next. Okay. All right. Coming back to the status. So I've covered basically the context. I've covered the CFR itself. Now let's look at the status of literature in the curriculum. Now, as mentioned by our Mr. Moderator, Brother Adam, just now, we have 2 components which is in the curriculum. We have the language arts and we have literature in action. So language arts is actually focused for the primary school, and literature in action is for the secondary school. Now, if you look at the slide, you can see that these components are actually listed together with the language skills outlined in the curriculum. All right, the standards-based English language curriculum. Okay, so yes, I can see a comment there. Can I address the questions at the end of my presentation? Is that okay? All right. Okay, so both of these components highlights or emphasizes the use of a variety of literary text genre. And for language arts, for example, it provides pupils with the opportunities to explore their creativity, potential, and allowing them to participate actively and express themselves without much reservation. And this is spelled out clearly in both the documents for primary and the secondary school as well. All right, and these components are designed to actually promote students' reading habit. Now, I think the issue of reading habit is currently still being addressed, in which we encourage our students to read, and literature is hoped to achieve that, is hoped to address that. Okay. Now, the components are also to develop their creative and critical thinking skills, in which I think everyone is aware that we need to embed CCTS, creative and critical thinking skills in our lessons. Okay, and also the opportunity to enjoy and appreciate different literary texts. Okay, maybe at secondary level, they go to the extent of analyzing them, evaluating them, and also encouraged to have imaginative responses to the text. Okay. All right. Going to the next slide. Now, I will look at how these two components are addressed at the different levels. Now, at primary, literature can be taught through the theme. Now, at primary level, we have three themes. We have world of family and friends, we have world of knowledge, and we have world of stories. Now, if we want to link directly to literature, we can actually relate closely to world of stories. Now, the world of stories introduces pupils to the wonderful and magical world of stories, and it can range from fables, be it local or foreign, folk tales, legends, and myths, to tales around the region as well as the rest of the world. And through these stories, pupils will be exposed to a wide range of vocabulary, sentence structure, aspects of creative writing. Now, isn't that what language learning is all about? So literature here should not be seen as something that you can put aside or because it's no longer a focus in examination, for example. So if we do not create that opportunity for our students to enjoy literature or this literary text, then how are we supposed to expose them with the vocabulary, the different sentence structure? Because the structures as used in literature is not the same as in text, narrative, factual text, for example. Okay, so apart from that, it addresses the moral values, knowledge, understanding, tolerance of other cultures, beliefs, which are imparted through these stories. Okay, and when you have literature, they will be able to understand the different cultural beliefs, and we will then see that they will be able to respect others and live more in harmony. Okay, so what the content standards and learning standards that's outlined in the SKP, or the standard-based curriculum assessment document, we often call it the SKP, is to ensure students develop the skills. Okay, we want them to develop the skills. We want them to actually acquire them so that they can build their character, okay, to build their character as well. Okay, so when we teach, we use literary texts through the fun-filled, meaningful activities that we have. These pupils will actually gain a rich and invaluable experience in using the English language. Now, going on to the next slide, which is the secondary component for for literature for the secondary school, is called the literature in action. Okay, so literature in action are connected through topics which are outlined in the secondary curriculum. So in the secondary curriculum, they have themes like people and culture, health and environment, science and technology, consumerism, and also financial awareness. Consumerism and financial awareness. So at secondary school, they are mainly focused on the prescribed texts. Okay, and the component uses texts like poetry, dramas, short stories, novels, in the same reason as it is used in primary, to inculcate reading habits. So you can see that the notion of reading habit or is being addressed or emphasized from primary right up to the secondary level, and it is used through these two components, which is the language arts and also literature in action. So literature in action content standards focuses on the pupils' ability to enjoy and appreciate literature, and they a bit higher compared to the primary school. They now get to analyze and evaluate the text and respond to them. Okay. All right. So if you notice for both of these curriculum documents, primary school, the SKP, and also the secondary school, the SKP, you will find that there is no performance standards for the literature component. There's no performance standards outlined for language arts, neither for the literature in action. Unlike the curriculum document we had before the aligned curriculum. Okay. Okay, let's look at the prescribed text. I mentioned just now we had prescribed text for secondary school. We also have prescribed text for primary school, but it's only for the upper primary. Okay, so for the upper primary, they will deal with poems. They have anthology of poems, they have short stories, and they have graphic novel. And to name a few short stories that they do at primary level will be The King of Kites, Something Weird Happened, and Akbar's Dream. Whereas for graphic novels, they have Jungle Book, Gulliver's Travel, and also Wizard of Oz. Now for the primary, if you look at the genre, it's a bit extended. Okay, they now look at poems. They also look at plays and also novels. All right, so some of the text used will be poems like Sad I Ams, short stories like Cheat, Fast is Fair. They have drama, A Night's Out, The Elephant's Man. They have Dear Mr. Killman. So these are some of the texts that teachers can actually use in their classroom with regard to the literature component. Okay, coming to my final slide. Okay, when we look at the integration of literature, when we want to discuss about the practice of integrating literature in the curriculum, there is a need to understand these 5 aspects. All right, the role, the SKP, the SOW. For those who are not familiar with SOW is the scheme of work, okay, assessment and also time. These are what I feel will be the 5 aspects that you need to look at when you talk about integration of literature. So firstly, we need to recognize the role of literature, the role literature plays in the curriculum. Now, if you look at the documents that I've been sharing with you, before this in my presentation, you can see that literature has been significantly positioned in the curriculum. All right. Now, it goes to show that there is a need to integrate. There is a need to incorporate literature in the English language classroom, because it is seen as a catalyst to learn language and in helping to develop the language skills. Now, the use of literary text can actually bridge the gap between the pupils and the target language. All right, something that I would like to quote from Erham in 2016. Now, literature does not only provide language learning, but it actually brightens up the curriculum. It gives that fun element to the curriculum. All right, apart from the activities that you actually develop for the content. It gives that aesthetic value to the curriculum and made it possible to materialize the curriculum principles embedded in our curriculum. All right, one of the principles that's embedded in our curriculum, if you look at the DSKP, is character building. And we can do that through literature. Now, although literature is no longer tested in major exams, it's been taken out from SPM. It's no longer, we don't have UPSR anymore, neither do we have PT3, and it's no longer for, and even in the DSKP, it's not even, they don't have a performance standards to it. But you can still evaluate or assess it through the skills, the 4 language skills. Okay, so even the DSKP has positioned the literature component significantly in the content, in which it is a component in which you have to teach or you have to expose your students with. All right, so with that in mind, knowing that the DSKP also have highlighted its importance by including it in the curriculum, teachers should create opportunities for pupils to explore the available or even prescribed. Now, I know at upper primary and secondary school, you are prescribed with this text, but you also have a choice of selecting others in the market or others available, okay, to ensure that students can or pupils can reap the benefits of language learning through the text. Now, teachers are also provided with a detailed of work. Now, I'm coming to the SOW, okay, which is known as SOW, to assist them in comprehending the aligned curriculum. Now, the SOW outlines both textbook lessons and non-textbook lessons. I know some of the textbooks do not have the prescribed literary texts, okay, but then you can still include the prescribed text in the non-textbook lessons in order, and you can adapt it to your pupils' needs. And this will allow teachers to select lessons to feature the literary text they plan to use for students or pupils' exploration. Now, as I mentioned earlier as well, it is no longer tested at major exams, but in the document itself, also the DSKP, we don't see the performance standards, but it doesn't mean that we cannot assess it. You can assess it through the skills, to the language skills, because literary texts are used as a tool for you to actually develop the language skills. Okay, so even though it is no longer tested, there's no reason for us to sideline it in our teaching and learning environment or in context. Okay, and finally, let's look at the time. Now, time is always and remain a challenge for many teachers. And I know some would claim that when you use literature in class, it's time consuming to complete the text, for especially like graphic novels, dramas and novels. But then there's always room to compartmentalize the text through a series of lessons. All right. If you look at the topics itself in the SOW or even in the curriculum, you can actually deal with a topic for over a period of 2 weeks or even more. Okay, so the same with the literary text, you can actually deal with it over a series of lessons. And I do realize that it is impossible to finish even a poem in a lesson. So try to break it down to stanzas. So instead of dealing it as a poem, you deal stanza by stanza. And then finally, you can wrap it up as a piece. Okay. So basically, that is what I have, that are my views in relation to the teaching of literature in the current curriculum. And I hope and I believe teachers are still using this tool effectively in their lessons. Okay, going back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor. So now, Dr. Azrin will answer some questions that were posted during the presentation. So according to my technical team, it seems like there is no question posted. So Doctor, this is a sign. This is a sign that you did a very good job and your presentation was very clear. All right. I
I
like the
surely hope so.
definitely. So I like the fact that you left us with this reminder. Although literature is not tested, so don't sideline it because integrating literature in your lessons would enhance reading habits first,
Correct.
mostly, and also most importantly, it inculcate CCTS, which is the critical creative thinking skill. All right. So with that, if you still have question for Dr. Azlin, do save it. We will meet Dr. Azlin again at the end of the webinar session. So thank you so much, Dr. Azlin binti Muhammad, for
You're
providing
welcome.
us with very informative yet comprehensive presentation with regards to teaching literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum, especially on the policy and theoretical aspects. All right. So we will meet you again at the end of the session, Doctor.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, next, we will have the opportunity to hear from the person who is at the implementation level of teaching literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum. So before we dwell further into the discussion, let me introduce our next speaker. Right? She is Madam Ku Nur Suryati binti Ku Ishak. All right. Her professional contribution is she is a CFR master trainer in material adaptation, classroom observer in English curriculum. She is also a PBL practitioner and presenter for state and district level. All right. SPM English 1119 workshop presenter, trainer, facilitator at state and district level. She is also the secretary of Delta, Darul Aman English Language Teaching and Learning Association. And currently, she is holding a post of co-curricular senior assistant at SMK Batu 17 Kedah. So, Madam Kusuryati binti Ku Ishak will share her knowledge and experience with regards to her experience as a participant during the cascading course with regards to the teaching literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum. She will also share with us the approaches and materials to teach literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum exposed to teachers in rural schools during the cascading courses. And also, she will share her view and experience on the main challenges in teaching literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum in actual classroom in rural schools. So, without further ado, I pass over the session to you, Madam Kusurati. Thank you.
Okay, good morning and Assalamualaikum everyone. Okay, thank you Mr. Dharma, our moderator today, and congratulations first of all to the organizing committee, and thank you for having me today. Right. Well, you've listened to Dr. Azlina just now, right? And she has given a very extensive input on CEFR and how literature should be implemented theoretically and in practice in schools. Okay. But right. For myself, the committee has given me actually 3 questions. Okay. First, I was asked to share my experience as participants during the cascading course. And then the second one is what are the approaches and materials to teach in literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum. And the third one is my main challenges in teaching literature in, as Mr. Dharma said just now, in rural schools. Okay, I'll try my best to share. Okay, this is my sharing session based on my personal experience as well as what I've been dealing with throughout 2000, let's say what, 17, 18 until now. Right, CFR courses started in 2016 as they train master trainers, which later cascade the training of CFR nationwide. Okay, the training package consists of 4 main modules. The CEFR familiarization, okay, the learning material adaptation, okay, the curriculum induction, which includes the preschool, primary school, and secondary school, and last but not least, the formative assessment. Okay, the master trainers went for the courses first, and then they came back and cascade the modules to state master trainers, and then goes down to teachers in districts. Okay, as for myself, I attended curriculum induction for Form 3 as participants back in 2018. Okay, curriculum induction for Form 4 as observer, and learning material adaptation as trainer. Okay, so talking about experience, yes, I do have a few things to share. Right, during the training, we were introduced first to the relevant documents in CFR, which are the curriculum framework, document standard curriculum, and pentaksiran, which is well known as the SKP, and scheme of work, okay, SOW. Okay, if you listen to Dr. Azlina just now, she has highlighted all these documents, okay, and how to use it, all right? And in CFR, for your information, again, literature is not being taught separately as before. Like we used to have Form 5 novel, Dear Mr. Kilmer, and it's tested in SPM. And we have that 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and poems, okay, selected poems and short stories. Okay, now it is known as, for secondary school, is literature in action. If you see in your scheme of work, it usually appears at the end of every unit. So as Dr. Azlina mentioned, it's not explicitly tested, right? There's no questions or there's no requirement for students to study literature and answer questions on the literary text, okay, selected for the forms, right? It will not appear as question based on text, as I mentioned before, but okay, we learn about figures of speech, attitudes, and tone, okay, in reading as well as in listening. Okay, it will be asked in both skills, reading and listening. Okay, as for choice of words, when applied in writing and speaking, okay, it may help, right, to boost the language marks for students. Okay, so here teachers are actually aware that we do not teach literature in isolation. We do not teach literature as in that big L, except for schools who choose to have that as an elective subject. But we teach literature using selected materials in reading, or in fact in writing also we do have that writing a review. We do teach a review writing, right? So basically it's integrated. It's not in isolation. Right, for Form 1 and Form 2, literature in action comes in non-textbook lesson, and teachers are free actually to choose any poems, any short stories, or any other suitable materials based on their students' ability. Okay, it's not specifically mentioned in the textbook, or in the scheme of work that you should teach this novel, you should teach that short stories or poems. You have your own freedom, okay, to choose. Right. Of course, during the course, we were asked to do some material adaptation in order to create a lesson plan. So during this part, as I remembered, because that was like a few years back, okay, we had fun actually selecting materials and adapting it for the literature purpose. Okay, and we did some presentation, and from the presentation we could see that teachers are actually well versed on how to integrate literature in their lesson, in their reading lesson, in their speaking lesson, as well as in their writing lesson. Okay, so basically during the course, during the cascading, everyone is not actually being told to create a literature lesson. They are integrated in the all four skills. Okay, so that's, I think, something I could remember of my experience as participants during the cascading course. Right. My second question for today was, were you trained on the approaches and materials? Okay. Yes and no at the same time. Yes, but not in detail. Okay. As you know, our main focus of cascading is to introduce Ministry of Education's main document and teaching and learning materials, which is textbook. Okay, during the course, we need to make sure all teachers know how to utilize these documents, create lessons based on these documents, and these lessons later they will use to help them in delivering the lesson. Okay, so basically while doing that during the course, we actually were briefed about the suitable approaches and suitable materials to teach literature. It is not specifically in selected slots, I would say. It's throughout the session. Okay. What teachers need to know and focus is on the objective of primary and secondary education in each school. Okay, for example, in literature in action, by the end of Form 5, okay, pupils are able to respond, to analyze and evaluate a variety of literary texts. So they have this objective in each form, and all teachers are aware of this. And so in planning the literature in action lessons, okay, the approaches that they need to they need to use, and the materials, preparing the suitable materials, we believe actually the teachers are the expert. Okay, we have full trust in them. But mind you that at the same time, we do provide what we call that assistance if the teachers need some assistance in creating or choosing or approaches to teach literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum. Okay, and I think I'm going very fast here. I hope the committee is not okay. Okay. My last part of the question is the main challenges in teaching literature in CFR-aligned language curriculum in actual classroom. I am also teaching Form 5. Okay. This year I was given Form 1. Okay. So when I got this question, when you mentioned about challenges, I remember this dialogue about welcoming new teachers. They say teaching is like going to the park, but they never tell us that it is a Jurassic Park. What a quote. Okay. Right. Challenges. Yes, we do have challenges, but they differ a lot by many factors. Of course, by teachers' experience, by the what else? By the geolocation of the school. Okay, like myself, we were in, I would say, rural area of Kedah. Okay, my biggest challenge is to make my pupils read. Okay, as you know, low to intermediate proficiency students, they are so reluctant to read. Okay, we are still actually until now struggling to make them fall in love with reading, because that is actually where it all started. Okay. Okay, let me share this experience. Last year, I was teaching Form 4, and we were in Unit 2, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, the pupils read and extract about 20,000 leagues under the sea. Okay, that was during our reading lesson. Okay, and in that reading lesson, we read the text together. Okay, of course, I need to explain actually paragraph by paragraph to them and answer some questions. Okay, the this one part in the textbook where the students need to do a project. Okay, and that project asks us to do some research about another novels by Jules Verne. Okay, based on the task, actually it was like 2 to 3 weeks lesson. Okay, based on the task in the textbook, my students, okay, SMK Batu 17 actually came out with a poster of Jules Verne's novel, a variety of novels, quite a number of novels actually. And they created a very nice posters of the synopsis of the story, the characters, the plot, okay, and as well as the lessons learned, the moral values for that particular novel. Of course, they Googled and they refer to notes, but making them read the synopsis, read the novel, although it's not a complete novel, but making them read that particular literature text is actually a milestone for us in Batu 17. Okay. I was actually amazed with their creativity in presenting the novel through the posters. Okay, despite the challenges of reading and understanding the story, okay, some of them managed to deliver a very good presentation. Okay, during the final stage of the project. Okay, there's a few more actually literature text in textbook, if you refer to textbook, Form 4, Form 5, in fact for Form 1 also, okay. They read the extracts, and it depends actually on the teachers depends on the teachers on how to make them read more on that particular literature items. Okay, that depends on teachers. And yes, my biggest challenge again, okay, to make them read. Okay, I think that goes all the way throughout the schooling semesters, okay, to make them read and of course then proceed to enjoying specific literary text that we need to expose to them. Okay, I think for my part that should be all. Okay, back to you, Mr. Dharma.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Kusurati. So, ladies and gentlemen, now Madam Kusurati will answer some questions that were posted during the presentation. So, while waiting for the question, perhaps Madam Kusurati can respond to the following responses by the participant. So, we have from B Ganaswari, Teacher B Ganaswari, I suppose. So, she said that as for those who are using CIDs, we still have literature in our SOW, and we teach literature in isolation even though it is not tested in exams.
Yes, yes. CIDS is actually a program for creating the lesson plan, if I'm not mistaken. The lesson content, okay, if I'm not mistaken. It's not implemented throughout the nation, but in certain states. Yes, those who are using the normal way of writing lesson plans, also we do have literature in our scheme of work. We do have literature in isolation, but what I mean by literature in isolation is we don't have that kind of teaching literature based on specific text like before. Okay, we teach literature like we take extracts like what Dr. Azlina mentioned earlier. We take extracts, we take stanzas from the poem just to introduce them to the literary items. Okay, just to introduce them to the love of reading the literature. Okay,
All right, thank you.
all right.
And one more
Yeah,
before we pass over the session by
yes,
Teacher
yes.
Shazana Osman. My teacher used to teach us the Potato People novel. She asked us to act out the scenes in the book, which is really fun. I still
Exactly.
remember the whole story till today. Yeah.
Exactly. Students remembered best when they act it out. Okay. When we had this literature, like Dear Mr. Kilmer, we did that too. Okay. The joy of acting out the certain parts of the story actually makes the student remember most. Okay, that is what actually we meant by to make them engage, or to make them, okay, first of all read the text so that they can feel the joy of reading the story, and what more when you act the scenes out, right? It's really fun. Yes, I do have my students who still can remember the scenes from the novels they studied. Yeah, good for
All
you.
right. Okay. Okay. So from Sister okay. All right. So from Noliana binti Azmi, I was wondering why students are reluctant to read. Can you respond to
Reading,
that?
yeah. Okay, reading is not a habit. They read when we force them. They read when we ask them to do. But for them to read on their own, like what we used to do during our time, right? We borrow books from library. We read short stories. We read novels. Even when I was in Form 1, we read all those short novels, right? Like sorts of novels. But nowadays, okay, I've been teaching for like 23 years now, and this is my all-time challenge. Okay, all-time challenge to make them read. Yeah, project-based learning
Project-based
for
learning for
literature.
literature. Yeah. Any
Yes,
suggestion?
project-based. Yeah, good question actually. Project-based learning for literature. Okay, any suggestion? Okay, I have actually the one that I explained earlier, that is also one of my project based, a very simple one. Okay, you pick an author. Okay, you pick an author. You ask them to do some research. Okay, what are other novels written by the same author? And then form groups, assign them with different novels. When you assign them with different novels, let them do the presentation using their own creativity. Some would do in the forms of posters. Those who are good in drawings and all, they will do posters. Some are good in IT. They will do like PowerPoint presentations, or in fact, we do have TikTok, right, to present something, right? Then based on that, when they do presentation, remember that we can assess their skills through the project-based learning. Okay, we assess their reading through that. When they read materials, when they do research, they need to read before they come out with their summary of the story and all that, right? And then they write synopsis, they write their own view on that particular novel. Okay, and in fact, when they do the presentation, we can assess their speaking skills. That is the simplest way of doing project-based learning for literature. Choose one author, assign them to research for different titles of the novels, then let them do the project. Okay, of course, when we talk about project-based, it's not the outcome that matters. It's the process of
Okay.
doing the project. Okay, so make sure your students go through each stage, the process, and make sure they enjoy the process before they can come out with the actually outcome of the project.
Okay.
Yes.
Simple but yet very interesting activity.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Inshallah.
So one thing that I need to highlight from Madam Kusrati's experience, especially in terms of training for teachers. All right. Teaching literature training. With regards to teaching literature in CFR aligned English language curriculum is either not sufficient or very little, mentioned by Madam just now. So perhaps actually we have the right person. Dr. Azlin could take note of this and also suggest to ELTC, right, to look into this and perhaps in future organize more courses
Yeah.
yeah, for teachers in terms of getting them trained to teach literature in CFR aligned English language curriculum. Yeah. All right. So with that, thank you, Madam Kusurati,
Most
for
welcome.
sharing on her experience with regards to teaching literature in CFR aligned English language curriculum, especially on the training aspects and also the practices in actual ESL classroom at rural
Exactly.
schools. So if you
Thank you.
still have any question for Madam uh, Kunor Surati, save it. We will meet again, Madam Kunor Surati, again at the end of the webinar session. So thank
All
you very
right.
much. Yeah? All right. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed very lucky to have the next speaker joining us today to share his experience dealing with teaching literature in CFR English language curriculum in ESL classroom in rural schools. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce Mr. Pravindran Balakrishnan. So let me just read the bio, yeah? So prior to attending his master's degree in Loyola University, Chicago, United States of America in 2019, he received his BEd TESL from University of Portsmouth, UK in 2013. As a secondary school English language teacher, he has spearheaded many youth-led projects related to education and community work, particularly in Terengganu, so which have been recognized with several awards, including Winnie Chan Award 2016 and Best ICT Innovation in 2017. He was one of the leading members of his school team that won a grant worth RM 20,000 as the main prize of YTL Foundation School Award in 2018, enabling them to carry out their proposed 21st century learning program. His mission is to promote youth empowerment by raising their awareness of their future capabilities. So, Mr. Pravin Balakrishnan will share his knowledge and experience with regards to teaching literature in CFR aligned English language curriculum, his ways and means in promoting literature in CFR aligned English language curriculum among students, particularly in rural schools, his views on growing interest in literature among students and parents in rural school, the resources and material used in teaching literature in CFR aligned English language curriculum in rural schools, and the support that he received from the stakeholders in teaching literature in CFR aligned English language curriculum, particularly in rural school. So I pass the session over to you, Mr. Praveen.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can hear me, all of you. Okay, so I'm very excited to be here. Thank you to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share my experience, and I'm very lucky as well to to share the floor with two very esteemed panels. Uh, so, can I get my presentation up? Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, um, so today I'm going to be talking about the theory and practices of teaching literature in in a CFR aligned English language curriculum. And we will go to the next slide. All right. The next slide, please. The next one. Okay, so these are the four things that I'll be talking today. And mainly what I'm going to be talking about is sharing my own experience in the classroom on how I teach, on how I not teach, rather how I would include parts of literature within a lesson. So I don't really teach literature in isolation. At the same time, I don't teach literature explicitly. Rather, literature is put in the introduction or in the concluding part of the lesson, or perhaps even one of the main activities. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, I think it's very important for us to come to terms with our current reality. I think, firstly, I think literature is the back burner. When I say back burner, what do I mean is we have somewhat not neglected, but we don't pay much attention to literature these days, mainly because it is not tested in summative assessments. Um, I know that we are trying to move away from an exam oriented system, and we want to get our students to and we want to instill lifelong learning among our students. But I think literature here has been somewhat become the stepchild, I would say. um, because once it's not tested in exams, what naturally happens is it is not given the attention to be taught in the classroom. Now, that is probably not the best way to think about literature, because literature itself is not an exam thing. But we need to look at the culture of our education system, and exams, assessments have played a big role in it. Even right now, when we have a new education minister, the first few things that is being discussed is reintroduction of UPSR PT3, right? So assessments have always played a big role in our education system, in our culture, in our school culture. So it's extremely impossible to detach from that. But if we have the right tools, we can for sure include literature in whatever we are doing. I think literature is extremely important. It gives us an insight into different cultures, and it increases creativity. It expands our horizons as humans. And without literature, I think we will be more ethnocentric, and that is where the globalized world is going. So I think literature can solve not all the problems, but at least give insights to us as humans. Um, Moving on. Now, literature nowadays, I would say, it's not just poetry or plays or novels. It has morphed into something else. And I think a lot of things that students, I mean, even in rural schools, or maybe somewhere not extremely rural, but somewhere which is a rural demography, you're going to have students with mobile phones, right? And students also have motorcycles, right? These two things. So they have mobility and access, right? So no matter how rural the school is, right? So what I'm trying to say here is students, they are very inclined in the world of social media. So we need to find a balance in incorporating literature with their interests, right? With their interests that they have. So uh, I would define literature in a much wider scope these days. For example, booktube is one activity that you can do. You get your students to read a book or read a part of a book, a chapter, share it online. uh, YouTube, I don't know. um, Insta poetry, get your students to write poetry on Instagram, screenshot and send it to you as evidence, right? So this is how literature is coming to play, coming to action now. So this is how we get students to actually utilize literature in their own life. Right? These are just very simple examples. We'll go deeper examples later. And even today, like writing captions of stories, right? It can be seen as literature in practice. And what we are seeing today is like I teach in a I think I teach in a semi-rural school. I would say it's bordering the town. Okay, and I have students who are in the who are in the B40 category. They might not have a good home, right? But they do have mobile phones, and they are very active on social media. They're active. They are very active on Instagram, TikTok as well. And when they write captions and stories, right, it's in English, but they don't speak English at school. They have no interest in the language, but when they write captions and stories, they would Google an English phrase, a popular phrase, and use it in their stories. So I would say even writing captions today is a way to get students to be involved in using literature. And it's something very small, something extremely small, but something that might grab their attention. And I think this is where we as teachers, we play a huge role in really making them see uh, how English is important for them, and how they can use English, and how they can modify and play with the language. And I think that is what is missing today. I think students these days, they are reluctant to read because they don't see the goal. What does reading bring to me? They don't see any tangible um, they don't see any tangible reason to do it, right? They don't see what is the value that I'm getting out of this activity? What would I get out of this activity? And I think it's because of the world, the way it is shaping today. That is the reason why I think students are reluctant to read. Even I'm reluctant to read these days, because I ask myself, like, what I'm going to get at the end of the day. I'm going to spend X amount of time to read. What would I get? What is the benefits that we get, right? And I think this is probably one of the biggest disadvantages when we have this thing that we call the knowledge economy, where we uh, structure the education system to what the economy needs. So we're going to have a lot of disenchantment. um, so moving on, social media here plays a big role. It can transform what is literature and how it is being produced. And I think at the same time, social media also can kill the depth of literature. I think that is a big problem we are facing. We have reduced, our attention span has reduced, and this is a problem here. But we can try to somehow use social media for the benefit of it. But we also have to be very careful in how we use it, because social media has led to many, many problems. And finally, teaching literature can also be seen as a burden. Actually, this is the reality. Like, it's very simple to say that teachers have to find new strategies to teach. Teachers have to find, but the truth is, I think teachers have their hands tied, and most of the time that we spend for our creativity is being used to do meaningless paperwork. And I think this is a huge problem. And as much as it, like right now, right, it's a Saturday morning, and we have like a lot of teachers right here sharing your experiences. So this clearly shows, right, that we are passionate in what we do. But when we go to work on Sunday or a Monday, when we go to work, first thing you do is you go to APDM, you key in the attendance, and then a lot of paperwork come into play. So we have no time to put our creativity in action. So I think as much as we need to find ways and to make it work, and I think that is the hardest part. Okay, so this is one example. Exactly, I think there's a good point here by Sujata. She said it looks like a burden if you don't enjoy it yourself. So I think as a teacher, you need to ask yourself as well, is literature something that you enjoy? If you enjoy and you get joy from doing it, it will really, really work. And I think I take joy in doing comics. So this is one thing that I do in my classroom. I get students to create comics. It can be either physical or digital. And comics help students to use language naturally. And the most important thing with comics is, like, we get to think in sequence, the different frames, and they get to think stories holistically. So I think this is one way we can use comics in the classroom. And I think it really comes back to this: what is your interest as a teacher? If you enjoy doing it, you would enjoy doing comics in the classroom. If you enjoy doing comics, then your students will be also reflected in your students, right? So it's also good to ask yourself, what do you do? This is what I do in my classroom. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. The next one is Nilam. I think all teachers know what is Nilam. Every year we need to find a candidate to represent the school, and I think Nilam, in a way, we can be empowered and utilized in a more holistic way. And with what I do with my students is like I get them to read a book, and then they need to retell the book. And I think many teachers have also done this, but this then goes into the Nilam collection as well. So for them, it's a win, and for me, it's a win because now they're retelling stories. And like if you are very creative and you enjoy doing this, you can make it into a podcast. You can make it into a video review. It's really up to your creativity and also up to your technological skills on how you want to use this. But Nilam is probably one of the what element or the program that's already there that teachers can just take and use, and this can be part of the Nilam program as well. So this is probably the next another strategy that we can use. Can we go to the next slide? All right. So teaching literature in the classroom, what I do with my students, this is a very how do I say this? This is a very simple way. I always start with speaking, impromptu speaking. All right. So the other day, what I did in my classroom is they are going to write a story together. So start off with one student saying, one student giving a sentence of a story, and then another student says the next sentence, and so they build a creative story, and then from there it moves on to writing. And I think this is probably one of the best ways because it's the most simplest way, I think. And but what it does is like students, when they let down the barrier and they speak, it doesn't matter how bad their grammar is or they don't know a word. It doesn't matter. You can help them out of that. But what happens is when they see their stuff, when they see their thoughts being written on the board, it starts to crystallize that they are now immersing in that experience of using language, right? And this helps their confidence and reinforce their learning. And then one of the good thing that you can do is do a compilation of stories, and by the end of the school year or maybe the end of that semester, you can share the stories with them, as a proof of their work. And it's the same thing you can apply for writing a poem. So you start off with speaking and then you move on to writing. And I think this is very exam centric, I would say, as well. But at the same time, it is helping students to actually use the language in a very creative way, in an authentic way. And I think, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so another thing which I've done with my class, and I think this is something that you can do when you have like upper intermediate students, students that you can go to the classroom and speak English to. Usually, you might have these kind of students in the front classes, right? You can do something called a speculative fiction, and it's to stimulate new ways of thinking about the world. And it's extremely creative. It's extremely imaginative. But what we get is we get students writing about dystopian stories, and we get like I think recently I went to my classroom and I asked my students, "Did you guys watched Avatar?" And all of them went, "Oh yes, sir, we watched it." And some of them said, "Oh, we are going to go this weekend to watch the film." So and these are rural school students. These are rural students, right? And the cinema is like I think 15 kilometers away, right? But it's very accessible for them. But they would go and watch these films, right? So they do have an understanding of the world, of they do have an understanding of the imaginative world out there. So we can use speculative fiction to actually get them to become authors. And the kind of stories you're going to get is like really mind blowing. Like there was one story written by my student that says that in the future, only the smart students have access to healthcare. The poor students, the ones who fail in exams, will not be able to go to clinics. So I think that was that is something that got me thinking. Like probably that might happen in the world one day, but uh, it got me thinking that they are able to speculate the future and they are able to see themselves, and this is very important for themselves. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Since we are running out of time, I'm just going to go through this. Okay, the next thing we can do is the podcast. I think this is a wholesome thing, because first you need to brainstorm with them, then you develop a script with them, and then you need to deliver the script in a fashionable manner. But podcast again helps to reinforce their learning, and now they are writing and speaking for an audience. So then the language that they use is also uh, will also need to reflect that. So this is again is literature in action, right? They will need to, for example, one of my students, they did not a review, but an experience going to the roller coaster. So this is something that uh, literature comes into play. They need to put their emotions, experience, and drawing all those sensory details into it. Okay, can we go to the next slide? I think we are towards the end, and I think all right. Okay, so the next slide, please. Okay, so these are the resources for comics. I usually go to wittycomics.com, and the students can do it on their own. And I think some of this you can also use it on your phone. And what I do with my students for podcasts, I would get permission from the principal for the students to bring their phones, and they would record. They would record, and then they would connect the audio together. And trust me, they know those softwares that they need to download to combine those audios. That's for podcasts. As for comics, they can also use their phone to do it. You can also print out worksheets, give it to them, and they write dialogues. And this is just to get them, and then write dialogues, or maybe you print out a comic which is already done that already has a dialogue, and ask them to replay or role play in the classroom. So these are some of the resources that we can use: Witty Comics, Make Believes Comics, and Pixton. Pixton is very cool, but I think for Pixton you would need a computer. Can we go to the last slide? And the support. The last one is the support. Okay, so I know ELTC is doing the HEAP program, and what I notice is through the HEAP program, teachers have the ability now to explore literature. And I know ELTC recently published an action research, a compilation of action research, and I think was great. So maybe the next project ELTC can do is a compilation uh, of literacy products, right, or literacy work by teachers and students. And the other support that I think teachers have with them is chat groups, and I think it's important for teachers now to navigate together. And also, there's a lot of directives for ministries, like getting teachers, and also like getting parents to rethink, like education is more than summative assessments, right? It's how they participate, how students participate in the classroom. And I think that is very important, to get students to participate in a very authentic and natural way, instead of looking at what is your mark at the end of the time, or what is your DP at the end of semester. Okay, I think that is the end of my session. I'll pass it over to the, yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Praveen. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now Mr. Praveen will answer some questions that were posted during the presentation.
Right.
Okay, question from again teacher Ganaswari. Just curious to know, since UPSR and PT3 exams are not going to be revived soon, will the literature component be included in exam as before?
I have no idea. I think this is
No
something
idea.
the ministry would know. I think maybe Dr. Azlina would know as well. But personally, for me, I think maybe we shouldn't include it as an exam, because then it becomes how do you say this? Very constrictive, very restrictive in teaching it. But yeah.
Okay, so that is Mr. Praveen's view. All right, any other question? Or any comments that Mr. Praveen can respond to?
Yeah, so there's a comment by Miss. Oh,
Okay.
okay, wait.
Okay, this is by Miss Pei. All Dungeon is also another great app to encourage writing among students. It's fun and very interactive.
Right. So I think I've not used AI Dungeon, but I know my students right now are using all these. I mean, these are really high level students, right? And they use these apps, not apps, sorry. They go onto online and they type words, and then the words will create images. So yeah, I think we can use this kind of tools in the classroom as well. Just want to respond to one comment by, okay, by Mr. Nityanandan. How do we retain their interest in literature if the storyline ain't interesting? It's not like we're discussing Avatar or Avengers with them. I think this is so true. Like it's very hard to connect William Shakespeare work with my students, right? They will be
Yes.
like, why are we
Mm,
learning William Shakespeare, right? It doesn't make
mm,
sense. But if I went to class and I thought, okay, today we're going to talk about Iron Man and Captain
mm.
America, understand their personalities, okay, and then write a multiverse, what is going to happen, and say Iron Man and Captain America are now enemies, right? So write a multiverse out of that. That would interest them more, I would say. But again, this comes back: what is literature? Is it the works from these great canons, or is it the new media, these new forms of literature that we are looking at?
Okay, another comment. Okay, I used by Madam Sujata. I used to use the poems and come out with poetry sketch. Usually, my backbenchers are the one who memorize the lines, and they did a great job. Your
Right.
response to this?
I think
Yeah.
I find this, yeah, I find this very fascinating because whenever there's something related to memorization, it's usually the backbenchers are the one who will perform, right? Because they know that they can do this, right? They can achieve that level that is being needed. And you get all these like really good students who are highly creative. They are not interested in it. They'll be like, "Oh, sir, why are we doing this today? This is a cringe. I don't like doing this." But I think when you are dealing with lower proficiency learners, I think something like poetry sketch, they enjoy it. And you can take that poetry and say, okay, now we're going to do a concert in the classroom. So the broom becomes the guitar, the dustpan becomes the, I don't know, the table becomes the drum. So you can take that poetry, make it into a song, and they would enjoy performing it. It's very interesting.
Okay, probably one more. Okay, Madam Ina, TikTok also works with these Gen X kids. Yeah.
Yeah. And also know
Mm.
many teachers who use TikTok these days. And I think TikTok is probably one of the one of the. I mean, many students are using TikTok, and I don't necessarily agree with all the content in TikTok, but it's one way to attract them.
All right. Okay, one last question. Can my technical team paste this question, pin this question by
Yeah,
Madam Nur Hidayah binti Sani? Her question is, thanks for the awesome sharing, sir. My question is, my peoples have no access. All right. My question is, my people have no access to personal
right.
gadgets like own handphones. So can you suggest any other conventional teaching strategies to teach literature? Perhaps in your
So,
experience dealing with
so
the students?
yeah, yeah. So I do have some classes where they don't really have access to personal
Mm-mm.
gadgets. It's usually shared or they don't have any. So I think in this setting, what would work best is to use worksheets, printed out worksheets, which is contextualized. Maybe you have adapted the material. I think this would be helpful to the students. And dramatization, uh, doing plays in the classroom, role plays. I think this would make teaching fun for them.
All right. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Praveen, Praveen Dharan, for the great sharing on matters with regards to teaching literature in CFR aligned English language curriculum, especially on practices aspect in actual ESL classroom in rural school. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, we will go ahead and take some questions from any of the speakers to respond. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your question in the comment box in your control panel. So we should have all the three speakers up. Yeah. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, while we wait for your question, the Secretariat has posted links for webinar feedback. All right, just a reminder, a certificate of attendance will only be given for those who have responded to the feedback. And we are also posting registration of attendance to SPL KPM given in QR code. So just for your information, we have about 500 overviews on YouTube Live this morning, which is a very positive response from all the English language teachers. All right. Okay. So this link will be available for 30 minutes from now. And participant can get the link and register yourself for the SPL KPM. So any question, my technical team, perhaps we could take another two more questions before we end the session.
Good Morning, Mr. Moderator. I think there are two questions for me
All right. Okay.
earlier, which I would like to address. We
All
have
right. Go
one
ahead.
from Zita binti Tambi, which who said that time consuming, yes, but we need to make it in line in our teaching. Yeah, as I mentioned in my presentation earlier on, teaching literature. I mean, incorporating literature can be time consuming, but then it is up to the teacher actually to decide on how you want to go around it. So there's no one fits all strategy that you can actually employ in the classroom. So I believe the teachers, I think Mr. Praveen has actually recommended quite a number of interesting strategies that you can use. We have conventional ones as well. So it comes back to how the teacher go handles it, manages it in the classroom. And the second question is from I Sheila. Only the Form 1 and Form 2 has non-textbook lesson. Actually, all the SOW has non-textbook lessons from year 1 right up to Form 5. So if you look at the SOW, you will find that, for example, Form 3, Lesson 101 is non-textbook. Form 4, Lesson 12 and 13 is non-textbook. Form 5, Lesson 6 is non-textbook. So at every unit, you will have a non-textbook lesson. For the primary school, the moment you fulfill the modular cycle, you will have a non-textbook lesson. So you do have non-textbook lessons available in the SOW, and you can actually insert, and we do in the SOW indicate the need to teach language arts and literature in action if you read the first few pages of the SOW. All right. Okay, that's the two questions I received earlier on. Thank you.
All right. What about any more question? I think that's about it. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our webinar session today. We hope the views and experiences shared by three of our most distinguished panels had enhanced our own knowledge and experiences with regards to teaching literature in CFR-aligned English language curriculum in terms of theoretical and practices aspect. So once again, our deepest gratitude to all our speakers for being here this morning. We would like to thank everyone who made this webinar series possible. Thanks again for joining us today. We would like to welcome all of you to join our webinar session 2 tonight and session 3 next Saturday morning. More info on the promos, on the promo posters. So I am Muhammad Adam Dharma bin Pakasilan. See you next time. May Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala shines His blessing upon all of us. Assalamualaikum and goodbye.